Good evening. Thank you for joining us to our Studying in the USA webinar. My name is Basha Dudek. I'm an Education USA advisor here at UK Fulbright. My role is to give advice to any student that would like to study in the US from the UK. A bit about myself, I actually studied in the US at a college and played basketball there, but I'm originally from Poland, and I also have my master's degree from the UK. So I'm also joined by my colleague, Rowena.
Hi, everyone. My name's Rowena. I'm also one of the Education USA advisors here at Fulbright in the UK. And like Basha, we're both passionate about helping anyone who wants to study in the US study in the to get there from the UK. As you can probably tell, I'm from the UK, but I was given an opportunity to study in the USA. And it was completely such an amazing experience. So I feel very, very lucky to have a job now where I get to help other people in the UK have that same experience. Back over to you, Bash.
So just so you're aware, this webinar will be recorded and available to you afterwards. And tonight we're going to talk about how to choose a university in the US, what kind of funding is available to you, and how to apply to universities. And we'll also, at the end, we'll take some questions from you in the Q&A box. So let's get started. So what is the US-UK Fulbright Commission? So the commission was established over 75 years ago by Senator Fulbright, and Senator Fulbright himself studied in the UK as a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. And in the aftermath of World War II, he wanted to encourage cultural and educational exchange, so he formed the Fulbright Commission. And we are a non-for-profit organization that is jointly funded by the US and UK government to promote peace and cultural understanding through educational exchange. So how do we do this? Well, we do this by offering scholarships for postgraduate study and research in the US and UK, and offering an advisory service to assist students, parents, and advisors with applying for US universities. Now, this advisory service is part of the Education USA network, which is a US Department of State network of over 400 international student advising centers throughout the world. So it's not just in the UK. And our aim as Education USA advisors is to offer free and unbiased advice to help UK students study in the US. And we are also the only official source of US study in the UK. So why study in the US? There are a variety of different reasons why study, but some of the bigger ones are the quality and reputation of US universities. So there are over 4,500 universities in the US that offer undergraduate degrees. That's compared to about 120 in the UK. And within that 4,500, there is a huge range of different personality and styles of universities. So we'd like to take caution that you pay as little attention to the rankings as possible, and instead of focus on what we call fit. So we'll go through this a little bit later on, but this way you might find many high quality universities that you may never have heard of before. It gives you opportunity to experience campus life and activities. So US universities are known for having a very vibrant campus life, and they encourage their students to be involved in outside extracurricular activities outside of the classroom. Some examples of extracurricular involvement are music or a cappella, which is basically singing to music without instruments. Maybe you're interested in dance or sports, and some universities like Wisconsin University has something called a log rolling society. So there's a variety of everything for any interest group. The US university offer very flexible academics. So they're based on liberal arts and focus on teaching. And this is a top attraction for UK students. So US universities follow an education idea of the liberal arts curriculum, and they look to educate a well-rounded student. They give you flexibility to explore interests before selecting a major, and they have a big emphasis on teaching and engaging classroom environments. You could take different combinations of study topics. So for example, if you're good at math and you might be thinking might go into engineering, but you also enjoy art, you could take classes in art or history. There's a lot of students that go to the US and they switch from their original plan. For example, you might be interested in biomedical engineering, but you might take a feminist class to see if you like it and switch to something like global gender studies. So it gives you a bigger flexibility than in the UK. There's a lot of funding opportunities in the US, which is a surprise to some, but this is another top reason to study there. We will discuss this later on, but keep in mind there are many opportunities to find a variety of scholarships in the US as compared to the loan-based system here in the UK. Studying in the US also gives you the chance to internationalize your CV. It's very appealing to employers. It shows that you have boldness to do something else. You have great interpersonal skills, and it builds your cross-cultural communication, just to name a few. It also gives you an opportunity to build networks of friends and professional contacts around the world. And there are many student job opportunities in the US whilst you're studying. On your student visa, you're able to work up to 20 hours a week during term time and 40 hours a week during holidays. And you also get a chance to work up to a year after graduation. It also gives you an opportunity to learn about a new culture. So the top reason to learn about the US and its culture, the US is really big. It spans across 6 time zones, and it has a great diversity in geography and cultures as well. You also get long summer holidays to explore America. And living on campus gives you the opportunity to help and learn, get to know the US culture from your classmates and fellow students. So what are the differences between the US and the UK? Typically, the US bachelor's degree is 4 years long, as opposed to 3 years in the UK. The admission to university is different as well. You apply to the university as a whole and not to a particular academic department. So this reflects the liberal arts aspect of US universities. And you don't have to choose your major until later on in your studies. This is compared to a very course-specific degree in the UK, where you have to apply to a specific course from the first year. There's less government control in the US universities, and the institutions have a bigger diversity and more freedom. However, that means that there are no set fees or centralized admissions process. So the fees and admission process will vary from university to university. The application process also varies. So in the US, the application process is slightly longer and it's more in depth, but that's because they look at you as from a more holistic approach. So they don't just look at your grades, but they look at you as a whole person. And the last difference is that you apply for funding alongside the application for admissions whilst you do that. There are a few exceptions. So law and medicine is studied at the postgraduate level in the US, as opposed to the undergraduate level here in the UK as well. So if you're interested in those two studies, please keep that in mind. There's also some terminology differences between the US and the UK. So a US high school, or years 9 through 12, they correspond to UK secondary school, so years 10 through 13 in England and Wales, years 11 through 14 in Northern Ireland, and S3 to S6 in Scotland. In the US, college, university, school, and institution are used interchangeably, and they all mean university, basically. Also keep in mind that college doesn't mean that you're less qualified, as it's the most used term for university in the US. You will also have various classes or courses, basically the equivalent to UK modules. And your degree program or major is the same as a UK course. So these are helpful to know as you research programs and schools in the US. So what is the timeline for applying to university in the US? We recommend that you begin your search to universities 12 to 18 months before enrollment. So that's typically at the end of year 12. You would then register for any required admission exams and aim to take these in the summer after year 12. Now, please keep in mind that a lot of universities in the US, they don't require admission exams, and the admission exams are optional. So you have to check on the university's website to see if you have to take those. You will then finalize your selection of where you will be applying in early autumn of year 13, or that's about 10 to 12 months before you plan to enroll. And we'll go over strategies of how to do this later on. Now, about 8 to 10 months before starting university, we'd start to put together your application and submit those according to the deadlines for universities. In the spring of year 13, before you enroll, so that's 4 to 7 months before you enroll, you could expect to hear back from universities you apply to with their admissions decisions. And based on where you were accepted, you would notify universities of your decision and apply for visa. And that's about 1 to 3 months before the enrollment. Now, we have plenty of resources on our website to help with your pre-departure, including things like travel advice, living arrangements, what the campus life looks like in the US as well. And you would typically start university in the US around mid-August or early September, which is slightly earlier than in the UK. And I'm going to hand it over to Rowena for this bit.
Lovely stuff. Thanks so much, Basha. So choosing a university that you're going to apply to is a really key step in this process. And that's what you're going to do first before you go anywhere near any kind of application forms or anything else. You're going to need to figure out the US system and figure out where is going to be a good university for you to apply to. It's a daunting step, I know, and it's exactly the same for American students as well when they're facing this decision of applying to a university, applying to college. The key thing here is thinking about being flexible and open-minded. You're going to come across a whole load of universities you've not heard of before, but it's really important to remember that there's a whole range of universities, and just because you haven't heard of it yet doesn't mean it's not good. There are more than 4,500 universities in the United States that offer undergraduate degrees, and that's compared to about 120 universities that we have in the UK that offer undergraduate degrees. So it's a much bigger system, and no one can know everything about all 4,500 universities. So it's a process of discovery, could potentially be quite exciting. You don't know what you're going to discover in this process. But we are going to, in this session, talk about how you can go about looking for universities, identifying universities that might be good for you, and some strategies that you can kind of implement in this choosing process. Next slide, please, Basha. So it's really important to remember that context of the US as you consider applying to US study and choosing which university that you're looking for. So you'll remember from what Basha's just said, there is no national set standard for US universities. So there's going to be a whole variety of different choices in there. So unlike UK universities, which tend to operate in a very similar way and tend to look fairly similar to each other, US universities can be really, really different. And they've also got a lot of freedom, right? So they've got freedom to set their own fees, to organize their classes in particular ways, to organise the kind of student environment, the vibe on campus, those personalities of each university and the students who go to them is going to be really different university to university. Whereas in the UK, there is a much more set standard way of doing things, whether that's fees, whether that's the application process through UCAS, or very similar study environments ultimately at the end of it. It means that there's going to be a lot of variety, and this is one of the things that's really appealing about US study. So you may be coming across universities that are fine, and then you may come across other universities which you're really excited about, and that's those different personalities coming through. It's really great to know that there are so many different universities, because the thing about it all is it means that there's likely to be a really good university, a really good fit for you somewhere out there. We also just wanted to note, we're going to talk more about funding later on in this webinar, but I just want to flag here, if funding, if scholarships or financial aid is something that you're going to need to go to university in the US, it's something that you need to put right up at the front of your process. Not all universities offer the same amount of funding to international students, and every year Basha and I talk to students who have thought about funding as an afterthought of their application process, and perhaps they've been admitted to a university that doesn't offer international students any funding at all, and they're really sad about that. So if you think that you might need some kind of scholarship or grants or anything like that to be able to attend US university, make sure you're thinking about that from the get-go, and we'll talk more about how you go through that, but make sure it's up front of your thinking. And then finally, something people ask us how this interacts with the 5 choices that you can make through UCAS. The great news is that applying to US universities do not take up any of those slots in UCAS, so you can still apply to 5 UK universities. And what we find is a lot of people will apply to US universities at the same time as UCAS, and kind of hedge their bets a bit, so they've got a backup plan in case the US piece doesn't work out. You can do both at the same time. Just you want to be mindful that the deadlines and the timelines for each are perhaps going to be working a little bit differently. Next slide. So where do you get started? So the most important thing that I can stress to you is each university is very different to each other, and universities are often looking for students who are going to be a good fit at their university. How do you know what fit is? It's the combination of factors that come together to make you a good fit at that school, and for you to be a good fit for that university and the university to be a good fit for you. So that could be about things like how the classes are structured, whether it offers a major that you're even interested in. If you want to be an engineer, you might decide that a school that doesn't offer engineering is not going to be a good fit for you, and I'd agree. Maybe it's about the personality or the vibe of the students on campus. Maybe it's a combination of kind of environmental and living factors. Maybe you want to be somewhere where it gets snowy in the winter so you can go skiing. Maybe you're looking for like sunny, sporty vibes. That might be part of your fit. There's a huge range of factors that will be different for every single person. And it's all about finding and understanding yourself. First of all, what are you looking for from this experience? And what are you looking for from a degree? And then looking for universities that fit that mixture. So there's lots of factors to think about, whether it's campus size. Do you want to be at a university where there are 95,000 students? So there's lots going on at all times, but maybe you might be thinking actually 95,000 students or even 55,000 students sounds like a lot. Maybe you want to be in a smaller university where you're going to have an opportunity to shine and kind of be a big fish on campus. Maybe you're looking for somewhere where students are really collaborative and all help each other out. There's a lot of focus on group work, something like that. You may be looking for a very collaborative campus environment. Or maybe you're looking for an environment where students really relish the competition of studying and really work hard and are spurred on by kind of competition with each other. Neither of these things are good or bad, it's just different, and different people will have different things they're interested in. Maybe you're thinking about whether there are access to resources. So that could be a Black Students Network, or it could be an LGBTQIA network on campus. Different universities will have different support available, and so it's just really key. Yeah, we could perhaps just stop screen share, please, Basha. Perfect. So what you want to be doing is thinking about different factors that are available and that are important to you, and then to think about how you can bring those factors together and prioritize those in your search process. I'd really encourage you to think beyond rankings. So as Basha mentioned before, rankings are something that we use a lot here in the UK, but rankings actually work quite differently in the United States. If we can just stop the screen share again, that's amazing, thank you. Rankings work quite differently in the United States. And so you don't want those to be the only ones that are available to you. And you don't want to rely on rankings that don't measure universities in the same way as we do here in the UK. So we can talk about that a bit more in the Q&A. So you want to be thinking and looking for universities. You want to be open-minded and exploring lots of different types of universities. Great. Perfect. Back over to you, Basha.
Sorry about that, just a few technical difficulties on there. So how do you narrow those choices that Rowena was talking about? Obviously, decide what factors are important to you. And the next step is to use that information to begin researching the universities. Unlike UCAS, as Rowena mentioned, you are not limited to 5 universities. So in theory, you could apply to as many as you like in the US. However, for the time and financial reasons, we recommend that you apply to 6 to 10 universities. And to jumpstart your process of how to choose what you want to focus on and narrowing down from those 4,500 institutions to a list of about 10 to 20 schools that you think you could be a good fit for you. So how do you do this? Well, you can find resources on the choosing section of our undergraduate guide on our website, and it includes a list of links to search engines to help with this process of narrowing down your choices of universities. So we're going to go through an example of how to use that link and show you what the process looks like. So this is one of our search engines that's linked on our website called the Big Future College Search. And there's a variety of filters you could use, including the type of size of school you want. So you could pick a small school or big school, like Rowena mentioned. You could choose a location by state. You could also narrow it down by the major that the schools offer. So there's various filters that you could choose to narrow down that search. And this is where you apply all those factors that you were thinking about and are important to you. Now, as Rowena mentioned, it's important to consider funding if this isn't something that you're looking for. And within the affordability under financial need met section, you would select the percentage of needed meet to narrow down your list of schools that are going to offer aid. So as we mentioned before, not all schools will offer financial aid to international students. Some might offer more, some might offer less. So it's important to tick the box that's titled Aid for International Students. Now, you always want to double check that this information is correct on the school website as well. And without any filters, just keep in mind there are over 3,500 universities listed on that search. So using filters in different ways might help you narrow down those universities. So we have put a variety of filters to narrow down our list of schools. So we want to attend a 4-year school that has less than 9,000 students, and it's in Ohio, and that it will meet 100% of financial need. So as you could see, this brought down the 3,500 schools down to 4 universities, which is much more manageable. Now you could go to each university's profile to find more information about things like application deadlines, links to their website, the size of the institution's graduation rate, the average financial aid package. And you could also click on other options to the left to get more information about the campus lives, the majors they offer, the process of applying, what fees you'd have to pay, and different things like that. So I'm gonna show you a slide. This is from the Denison page. So if you go from the Big Future website to Denison and you click on their homepage, you would then select apply and then international applications, and you'd come up with this information. So as you could see, Denison prides itself on offering a cultural diverse environment for its students. Its international student body comprises of 16%, and it has a strong reputation that attracts talented students. It also gives you information of if you have to take any admission tests. So on here it says test optional admissions. They have no fee to apply for admissions, and they have no supplemental essay required. But you could see it gives you a little bit more information, and you could see if a school is something that something that you would fit in. So I'm going to hand it over to Rowena.
Excellent. So as Basha was saying, you want to be casting a great big wide net using tools like Big Future College Search to really hone down a wide list of universities. And then you want to start to slimline that list down into universities you might actually apply to. So here's a top tip. If it were me and I was doing this process, I would probably start a Google Doc, a Google spreadsheet, and I would just start to keep track of the universities I was looking at. So each university I look at, I might give a row to, and I might keep track of the web address, perhaps any pages that were particularly interesting, maybe any information about scholarships or particularly interesting classes that I take, maybe make some of my own notes just to keep my research organized, and then I can kind of keep track of the different universities that I've been looking at. So once you've done this kind of process of looking at universities, you want to start to slimline a list. And I can't emphasize this point enough. We talked a lot about the process of choosing universities, and you might be thinking, but Rowena, right, I've heard of some US universities. I've already got 2 universities that are of my, that I know I want to apply to. And what I've seen over the years of working with many students from the UK is if you are willing to do this kind of open-minded research process and be open to the results that you find, you're much more likely to be successful in getting admitted to a US university. And this process can take some time. So we'd always encourage you, as Basha was talking about with the timeline, if you're in like year 12 in England and Wales, this is a great time to be doing this university research. Because if you try and jump straight to the end and just stick 1 application in or 2 applications in, the danger is that you won't have figured out if the university is actually a good fit for you, and especially if it's a selective university, you're less likely to be successful. So once you've got your wide list of universities, you want to start to slimline down to about 6 to 10 universities to apply to. And these are places you would actually submit an application. So I would be saying to you here, you could apply to more than 10. Sometimes people ask me, like, is there a way to apply to more than, is there a limit on the number of applications? The answer is no, but I would say if you're looking to apply to 30 universities, then perhaps they're not going to be very well thought out applications, because you're going to make each application individually. So I would suggest somewhere between 6 and 10 universities that you're feeling are going to be a really good fit for you. So every university on your list needs to be a good fit. You may have universities where you're like, oof, this is a bit more of a reach. And so you might have a couple of those. But what you don't want to do is just select super selective schools, which have super small admissions rates, because you're perhaps limiting your chances of getting admitted. So you want to make sure you've got a balance of universities on your list. A bit like when you're applying to UCAS, if you've done that, you might have a range of different universities with a range of different grade offers, because then you know that you're spreading your chances around. So it's a little bit similar in the US, that you want to be thinking about that kind of selectivity. And if you're a good fit, making sure that you're looking at that kind of selectivity and how you fit within that. So the best place to find up-to-date information is normally the university's own website. People ask me, is there something like UCAS where you can just go and find all the information in one place? Unfortunately, no. The thing to do is to go to each university website, and you will see on each university website the university, the vibe. You'll start to get a sense of that university coming through. But you might also be able to find something called the class profile. And the class profile is a set of statistics about the last admitted class to that university. And so you can start to have a look at that to kind of get a sense of perhaps how international the university is, what proportion of international students come. So some universities might have 2% international students. Other universities might have 16% international students. So you can use those kind of statistics. You might also see statistics that suggest how many applications they had to how many actual offers that they made. And that will tell you a bit about the selectivity. You might see stats about how academically talented students were, or how well they did in testing if it's required. So you can find all of that information on a university's website. You can also find more information on the classes, on the programs themselves, the degree majors, the research going on at that university. You can find information about campus tours, both virtual and in person. You can find information about student life, sports, student housing, financial aid, everything will all be on the university's website. And so you can also check, as Basha was showing you with Denison University, it's always interesting to have a look at, do they have any resources for international students on their website? Lots of universities do, particularly if they're used to taking international students. And you may well find that your questions are well served by pages for international students. Another place you can look for really great information is on university social media channels. So all those universities in the US will have an Instagram page, and they will have often TikTok, and they will have a YouTube channel. So there's lots of great resources out there to be able to go and start discovering more about student life, the kind of vibe on campus, the personality of that university. And then the other thing I'd just say when it comes to university research is, unlike perhaps here in the UK, in the US, this is much more of a personal process. So don't think that you can't get in touch with the university or you can't ask them questions. Especially selective universities kind of expect to hear from applicants before they apply. So it's not a problem to drop them an email and to ask a question. And it's kind of a way of building a relationship with an admissions officer, which might be quite handy later down the line. Next slide. Okay, so I wanted to give you some examples of the types of universities that you might be coming across in your research. And these might be universities that you haven't come across already. All of the universities I'm about to talk about are some of the most selective institutions in the US, but you may not have yet heard of them. So the first one I want to talk about is Middlebury College, and Middlebury College is in Vermont, so in the northeast of the United States. And if you were visiting right now, you might be seeing this amount of snow. Probably in a month, this is the kind of level of snow happening in New England area. So Middlebury College is a small liberal arts college. And what is a liberal arts college? These are ultra collaborative, tends to be quite small, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5,000 students, but there's a real focus on both academic research and excellent academic teaching. So liberal arts college, like Middlebury, is known for a real focus on undergraduate teaching. There are no graduate students there. It is just undergraduate students and then research producing professors. Middlebury is really known to be a very liberal college, quite an artsy area of the US, and it's also one of the top research centers, one of the top professors are there for the area of climate change science and climate science generally. But you'll also be able to take advantage of things like beautiful waterfalls, hiking, skiing. It has its own ski mountain and all of those opportunities as well. Next slide, please, Basha. Okay, the next university I wanted to share with you was a university called Scripps College. So Scripps College is also a liberal arts college. It is based in Claremont, California, and it shares a campus with 4 other liberal arts colleges. So there's this kind of block which all 5 universities have, but within that they each have their own campus. So Scripps has its own architectural style, its own grounds, but the 4 universities kind of share a lot of facilities and a lot of student clubs, and even can take classes between them. So Scripps College is a college for female identifying people, and it is a historically women's college. And it has incredible focus on not just the sciences, but also on the arts. So there are incredible programs around things like art history, about museum studies, about even you can even take classes in things like bookbinding, all sorts of interesting things that you might not have heard of before. But Scripps College is just an incredible institution which has got this very specific identity. And if you check out their Insta, you'll see that there's a whole load of beautiful pictures of campus and the things that people are doing on campus. Next. Okay, the last university I just wanted to highlight to you that you might not have heard of so far is a university called Vanderbilt University. So unlike the previous 2 universities we're talking about, Vanderbilt is a research university, so it's a much larger institution. It has undergraduates, graduate students, so people who have already done their undergrad degree and are now working on things like masters and PhDs, and then research producing professors. Vanderbilt is about 100 years old, and it is in Nashville, Tennessee, so kind of the home of country music in the United States. And it's a really interesting place because the campus is this kind of green, leafy center, but it's also in the center of the city. So downtown is right there as well. So there's this incredible opportunity to use downtown Nashville as a kind of student playground. They have some incredible music acts who come for the equivalent of their Freshers Week. You go check it out. But they also have lots of particular research centers. So there's like 5 hospitals surrounding Vanderbilt. There's all sorts of big engineering pieces going on, as well as all sorts of arts and humanities opportunities as well. But it does change a bit because there are graduate students there. So there's definitely an undergraduate population and then a graduate student population, and that affects perhaps sometimes the opportunities that the undergraduate students have when they're studying on campus. If I was to describe Vanderbilt, I'd say sunny, sporty. Students have a reputation for playing hard, but also working really hard as well. Okay. The last thing I just want to say, and this is sometimes something I get a lot of questions about, and also I see constantly in the UK media, and it makes me wince every time, is I just want to talk about this idea of the Ivy League. You've probably heard of this term being thrown around. Maybe you're thinking, oh, that's just like the UK Russell Group, or that means the good universities. That's sometimes what I hear. I would just make sure that you are really careful when you're using this term. So the Ivy League doesn't equal the Russell Group here in the UK. The Ivy League is actually a sports league. Historically, it's a sports league between 8 universities in New England. That's all it is. They play sport against each other. There were 2 hours or so drive between each of them so they could play football games against each other. And there is no joining the Ivy League or becoming part of the Ivy League. So other universities can't join this group of universities. There are only 8 of them. Most people can't name all 8, at least not here in the UK. And most people are surprised when they learn that MIT is not in the Ivy League, Stanford is not in the Ivy League, Northwestern, not in the Ivy League, UCLA, not in the Ivy League. Any of these universities we might all consider to be really great universities, are not in the Ivy League. So be really careful if you are finding yourself talking about the Ivy League. Make sure you know what it means, and make sure that you're not limiting your choices, because there's lots of amazing universities out there. So make sure that you're not limiting down, just saying, okay, I'm only going to apply to the Ivy League. There is nothing in the Ivy League about the quality of education or whether it's going to be a good fit for you. And so just being aware of that along the way. And there are universities that have more selective admissions rates than the schools in the Ivy League. So it's not even the most difficult to get into, although all 8 universities, I would argue, are incredibly selective. Remember, in the US, when we talk about the top 1% of universities, with 4,000 plus universities, we're actually talking about 40 universities. Most people cannot name 40 US universities, let alone the top 40 US universities. So I just want to make sure that everyone's kind of clear on what the Ivy League is, and that we're moving past that as a way of thinking about US universities. Back over to you, Basha. Oh, no, sorry, it is me. I'm sorry about that. Next. Perfect. Okay, we're going to change track a little bit here, and we're going to be talking about funding your studies. So again, this is an area we spend a lot of time talking about. You've probably heard, if you're thinking about US universities, this idea that US universities are really expensive to attend. And the answer is yes, they could be, but they don't have to be. But funding is a challenge that everyone kind of faces, whether you're a domestic student in the US or whether you're a student from a kind of different country from the US, an international student like us here in the UK. So in this section, we're going to talk about some of the costs that you can anticipate in applying to US universities, and how to think about the cost of attending a US university. We're going to talk about some different types of funding that you might be able to pull on, and then we'll also talk about some strategies to bring this all together and make this work for you. Next. Okay, so what are the costs that you might expect if you are looking to attend a US university? So the first thing comes before you even get your foot on US soil, and that's application expenses, and it can be a bit different to how it is here in the UK. So you want to be just preparing yourself for these kinds of expenses. If the universities that you're looking at require admissions exams, you're going to need to factor those into your budget from the get-go. So these will be before you even apply to a university. You may need to take some admissions exams, and they come with a cost. So both the preparation for those and then the actual sitting of the exam. Now, not all universities require admissions exams, so this may be something you can strike off straight away. But for those that do need to take these exams, if you take one sitting of them, it's normally somewhere between 100 and 200 US dollars, which is about 150 pounds or so. These costs can add up. You might also find that each university asks you to pay for an application fee. So different universities have different policies on this, but it isn't unusual to be asked to pay a fee to submit your application. So sometimes that can be as little as $50, which is about 40 pounds or so, and sometimes that can be as much as $150. So that's a whole lot more, and that's per university that you're applying to. So those costs can easily add up. And then you also just want to keep in mind that if you were to apply and get into a US university, then there are going to be some costs around getting a visa to enter the United States, paying for a student visa unless you're a US citizen. So just being aware of some of these costs and making sure that you're kind of on top of them from the get-go. One thing I would just say is some universities do offer application fee waivers. You might see that language being used, and they will set out the criteria for those, but normally it's if applying to this university would cause your family financial hardship, then you can apply for a fee waiver. But just make sure you're kind of on top of that process and asking where you need to if that's your situation. Okay, next area to expect some costs in is the cost of tuition and fees. So costs in the US, some people say to me, well, how much is this going to cost, Rowena? And the thing is that at US universities, because they can charge what they like, there is an entire spectrum of different costs. So there are some universities where it's actually cheaper to go there in the US than it is to go to a UK university. And then there are some universities that charge an awful lot more than a UK university. So each university can choose their own fees and their own tuition. So just keep an eye out for that, and you can be pulling that in as part of your research. So some people might wonder, what's the difference between tuition and fees? Tuition is the cost of the education, the teaching that you're receiving, and then fees, you sometimes see these for things like student life, students' union, perhaps athletics, maybe things like membership to a university gym, things like that. So they're kind of not perhaps related directly to the cost of your education, but they are perhaps on top of the cost of that education. And then something that you just want to be aware of is this idea of cost of attendance. So I get a lot of people saying to me, okay, Rowena, I know in the UK tuition fees are but I'm looking at a US university website and they're talking about something called the cost of attendance, and it's an awful lot more. Be aware that in the US, they don't really tend to talk about tuition on its own. What a US university does will have a page on its website where it will talk about something called the cost of attendance, and that's per year. And that amount, that dollar amount, is made up of several different areas. So it will include perhaps tuition and the fees, but it will also include the costs of living at that university for a year. And so that might be the cost of a room in the dorms, a meal plan. Perhaps they'll estimate what you need for things like a phone. They might estimate the amount that you might need for books and supplies, because hopefully you're going to be doing some studying. Then they might also include in that a kind of sense of how much what they call personal expenses might you need. And that's for things like toiletries, clothes, fun money, all of that kind of thing. Different areas of the United States will have different amounts that those personal expenses cost. And so what a university does is roll all of those things into one number and call it the cost of attendance. So that's an idea of how much it's going to cost per year to attend that university. Only part of that might be actually billed by the university, the tuition and the fees. The rest of it may be an indication to you of how it works. So if you're comparing US to UK, make sure that you're not just looking at UK tuition fees, but you're also factoring in a room in halls, food, travel, all of those kind of things as well. So you can compare like for like. And then you just want to be thinking about the cost of living and any other expenses that might be coming up. So you want to be thinking about any costs of eating out, clothing, entertainment, any of those things. Those could be extra on top of everything else, depending on your lifestyle. And so you just want to be keeping that all in mind as you're budgeting. As I was saying, the cost of living can really depend on where you go in the United States. So the costs of living to live in central Manhattan are going to be a whole lot more than if you were living in central Michigan, which has one of the lowest costs of living in the US. And that's just the same as if you live in central London, life is a lot more expensive than if you, say, live in Lancaster. Different places have different costs attached to them. And then finally, I just want to flag health insurance. Happy to take some questions in the Q&A box. If you've got them, feel free to pop them in there. This is something that is a bit different to how the US works to the UK. In the US, students need health insurance to be able to access healthcare. And what you'll find is most universities do not want students who do not have health insurance on campus, just because that's a recipe for disaster. So you'll find information about health insurance plans on university websites. Normally, they provide information of a recommended provider if a student's parents don't have health insurance that they're covered by. For most of us in the UK, we're not in that situation because we have the NHS. So you can kind of purchase a health insurance plan that covers your medical needs along the way. Okay, next. So talked about some costs. You're probably like, oh, that's a lot of money. But there is some really good news at the end of this, because there are lots of funding opportunities available. It's possible to have an affordable US university education, and lots of students that Basha and I work with are able to fully fund their studies in the US without taking out loans. So how do people go about doing this? The key is being willing to put in the time and effort to go and seek out the different forms of funding and to apply for that funding along the way. Next. So where do you find this money? Rowena, where's the magic money tree? Do not worry, here is how UK students look at funding US education. So some primary sources of funding. The first one being personal or family funds. So in the US, there is a culture of prioritizing higher education, going to university, going to college, and this is seen as a really good thing. And so what families will do, that's the biological parents of a student, will do is save up and support their young person to go and study in the US, to go and study at a university. And so there's kind of an expectation for US universities that families here of students in the UK will do something similar for their young person. So prioritizing student education and investing in that young person to go to university. So the first form of money is to think about personal or family funds that might be able to support you. The next source of funding that I often see British students being particularly successful with is funding from US universities themselves. And there's two types of this funding, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But for what you need to know now, there's two types of funding, something called need-based aid, and then something called merit-based aid, which is sometimes known as scholarships. So we'll talk about more about those in a minute, but different universities are going to vary in the amount of money that they offer. So if financial aid, money, is something that is going to be important for you in your journey, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing that and looking to apply to universities that can offer the financial aid that you would need to attend. The next thing is area of funding is external funding bodies. We're going to talk about them in a minute, but these are people separate to the university who are looking to provide scholarships and other funding. And then the last form of funding that you could look at is loans. So my advice here is that I would always recommend that loans be the final resort and very carefully considered. So unfortunately, you can't take the UK student loan with you to the United States. It just doesn't go. And unfortunately, US-based student loans require you to be a US citizen or permanent resident, or require you to have a US citizen or permanent resident who's willing to sign to be liable for that loan on your behalf. So my advice again would be the loans in the US work quite differently. There is a range of different loans available, and I would just be really careful if you're feeling like that's the route that you have to go down. I would always say, can we broaden out your search and actually find other universities that might be able to meet your financial need rather than focusing down on student loans in the US. And it might be that actually it's a combination to afford studying in the US. It might be a combination of perhaps some merit-based scholarship from a US university combined with perhaps some family funding. These things can come together to make it possible as well. Perfect. So we're talking about university funding. And so here are the different types of funding available from the universities themselves. So beyond family funding, this is the area I see UK students being most successful with. And these are the different types of funding available. So what have we got here? We've got funding from the university, and generally the funding from a university doesn't need to be paid back. It is gift money so free money. So that's a really great part to get your life, get your career off and started. So the two types of funding, you've got need-based financial aid, and this is money that is based on your financial needs. So what a university will do is ask you, if you're applying for need-based financial aid, or this is the only type of financial aid they offer, they will ask you to fill out a really detailed family finances form alongside your application form, and you submit those together. And then if the university wants to admit that student, perhaps they think you're really awesome, what they will do is look at that family financial form, and they will figure out what resources are available to the family. So they'll be looking at things like income, the parents, income of the student. They'll look at what you have in savings, assets, all of those kind of things. And they'll look at what expenses are happening in that family. So they'll look at what's coming in and then what's going out, and they will calculate what is an appropriate amount for that family to contribute towards the cost of attendance. That's all the costs involved in studying at that university. Now, if there is a gap between what the family can afford and what it actually costs to go there per year, and the university really wants to admit the student and they offer need-based financial aid, then they will make up that difference in need-based financial aid. So this will mean it's different family to family, because each family's financial situation is different. And it means that some families may be paying half of the cost because they can afford to, and the other half is being made up in gift money from the university, whereas other families, perhaps a family that doesn't have anybody in work or anything like that, may not even contribute anything towards the cost of attending at university. So that's need-based financial aid. It is not offered by all universities, and not all universities can meet 100% of that demonstrated need. So some universities will say things like, we can offer need-based financial aid up to 50% of the cost of attendance. So if a family can make up 50%, but that's it, then they might be able to make up the next 50%. So it's really important that you're looking at the information on the university websites as you go about this. Watch out also for something called merit-based scholarships. This is funding from the university again, but works a little bit differently. So merit-based scholarships, the easy way to think about this is it's money that because you're the best at something. So a merit-based scholarship could be because you have outstanding academics in comparison to other people applying to that university. It could be because you are a trumpet player and the orchestra is looking for a new trumpet player in their orchestra, and so there is a music scholarship attached to that. Maybe it's because you have a record of outstanding community involvement or something like that. Different merit-based scholarships have different reasons they're awarded, and the universities will make it clear on their website why they award that. So for example, at Babson College, which is a university that's renowned for its kind of entrepreneurship studies, and it's in Boston. At Babson, they have a merit-based scholarship for international students called the Global Scholars Program. And so that is a merit-based scholarship that covers up to the full cost of tuition, which at Babson, I think at the moment is about about $50,000 to $60,000 a year. But then on top of that, they also offer need-based financial aid. So if you were a student who didn't have any resources available to you, potentially Babson could award you the merit-based scholarship to cover the cost of tuition, and then potentially some need-based financial aid to make up some of the living costs of attending that university. So you really want to be kind of keeping an eye out for opportunities. You want to keep an eye on things like deadlines and application processes. Sometimes for a merit-based scholarship, you need to apply by a certain point, or you need to fill out a particular application form on top of the main university application. It differs university to university, but really keeping an eye out for this in your research. And then a particular form of merit-based scholarships are around sports scholarships. We can answer some questions about sports scholarships if people have them in their in the Q&A, but sports scholarships are often awarded to people playing kind of elite level sport or very high levels of sport for the university, and students can look to become basically a student athlete. So that's somebody who's a student at the university earning a degree, but also perhaps playing for the university sports teams. So information is available on our website, but happy to take some Q&A on that as well. Okay, so you want to be really proactive, you want to be keeping an eye out for everything. I'll show you an example here of a university. So if we can have the next slide. So Rice University is a top engineering and arts and sciences university in Houston, Texas. It's famous because JFK made his speech about America putting a man on the moon by the end of the decade. He made that speech at Rice because of their aeronautical science and links with NASA and so on. So Rice have here, and we've just screenshotted their website, they have a page about the cost of attending Rice. And you can see that to attend Rice is around $54,000 in tuition. You can see some fees, you can see the cost of room and board, books, personal expenses, and then they come up with a total amount to attend, which is around $74,000. So that's a huge amount of money, but this is the kind of thing you might be seeing on US university websites and how it breaks down. Next, if we head over to some other pages on the Rice website, so next page, please. You can go along, and in the same area of the website, we can see information here about this idea of merit-based scholarships. So what does it say? Merit-based scholarships recipients generally distinguish themselves scholastically and personally, even within a highly competitive pool of admitted students. And then they give some examples of the types of reasons that they might award a scholarship. So, and then it says all admitted freshman applicants are automatically considered for merit-based scholarships. Great, no extra forms. So that's an interesting form of money at Rice that might be an option for us. Next slide. Okay, so we might also go ahead and have a look around for any pages about international students and financial aid. So here we have a page on the Office of Financial Aid for international students. It says that Rice University believes the cost should not be a barrier to attending one of the finest universities in the country. We admit students from all socioeconomic backgrounds and many students who might not otherwise be able to afford Rice education. International students, and this is the important bit, international students who receive need-based aid will have 100% of demonstrated need met with institutional grant aid. So that means that if Rice wanted to admit you and you could not afford to go, you couldn't afford to pay the whole amount, Rice will make up whatever you and your family cannot afford to contribute. So that's really great. Here it says application process. Need-based aid, it's offered to a limited number of international students. So I'm sensing that's going to be competitive. So I'm going to want to make sure I'm a competitive applicant to Rice. And then it says Rice uses a CSS profile for international students. So that's the name of the form that the student would need to fill out. So hopefully there you can see that there is a bit of information about how to approach this process and see what the information is available on the websites. Next.
Thanks, Rowena. So I'm going to talk a bit more about external funding bodies as another option to finance your studies. So as Rowena mentioned briefly, external funding bodies may include a wide range of professional, charitable, or governmental organizations that are external to the university. So they have nothing to do with the university. They're not part of it. They're completely separate from them. But they do offer niche scholarships, which have to meet specific criteria based on that funding body's mission. So they might look for students from a particular country of origin, maybe your ethnicity, maybe they're giving religious faith scholarships, or scholarships for an interest in a particular field or interest. Maybe they give you scholarships for a particular gender or for your talents. So for example, if you're a female student that is interested in engineering, you might want to look for engineering scholarships that are particularly for women in engineering. Now, if you are unique in any way, there is likely a funding body with scholarship out there for you. You just have to take the time to find it. So an example is of an external funding body scholarship is the Morehead Kane Foundation. So they give out scholarships for leadership, character, scholarship, and physical vigor. Those are the type of students they're looking for. And they provide a 4-year fully funded education experience for students of the highest caliber that meet those criteria at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So as you could see, it is possible to find quite a lot of money in the external funding bodies section. There are thousands of funding bodies, and you will require to do some research, and it will take some time and dedication on your part to sift through those scholarship listings. Also, each of them requires a separate application, so just keep that in mind, as it will take some time to apply for each external scholarship. For this reason, obviously the time and the effort it takes to apply, we do encourage students to first apply for university funding opportunities and then for external funding if you still need to make that difference. And on our website, you could find a link to scholarship search engines that help you narrow down what kind of scholarships are available to you that meet the criteria, or sorry, that you can meet the criteria of. So there are 3 different approaches to the funding strategy, which Rina touched up a little bit about. You could explore universities in places with a lower cost of living. So same as the UK, London is more expensive than living in Lancaster. Just like if you lived in New York or California, it's going to be more expensive than living in states like Ohio or Georgia or Michigan. American universities will list on their website the full estimated cost of attendance, as you've seen in the previous slides. So that will include the tuition, fees, any cost of living, and any personal expense that you might have. So you could have a look and scope out the places with lower cost of living. And keep your mind open, as Rina mentioned before. The more you research and the more you look at your fit, you might be able to find a school that you've never heard of that actually has a very reasonable cost of living and a reasonable tuition. There's also lots of programs with lower tuitions. So some universities charge less for their tuitions, some charge more. And also looking at all those funding opportunities that are available to you. Another way to save some money is looking at community colleges. So community colleges don't exist in the UK, but they're extremely popular in the US as an alternative pathway that could help save you a lot of money. They generally award associate's degree, which once again, we don't have on offer in the UK, but it's a degree that's often it often has a professional or vocational focus. And they have programs that allow students to study a 2+2 year transfer pathway. So what that means is that students start studies at community college. They're there for 2 years. And then they transfer to a 4-year university, receiving a bachelor's degree from that university. So you would still go to a university for 4 years, but the first 2 years will be in college, and the next 2 years will be at the university of your choice. And many community colleges in the US have transfer agreements with universities. So for example, as you could see on the slide, the Los Angeles Valley College, which is a 2-year community college, has a partnership with universities like UCLA, University of Southern California, and Cal Poly. So what that means is that students who go to Los Angeles Valley College for their first 2 years have an option to transfer to any of those universities in California or any other universities in the US. I actually did go to a community college in Michigan. I had an option to go to a state university, but it was too expensive and I couldn't afford it at the time. And I received a basketball scholarship to a community college, which was paid for my tuition fees. And to me, it was a no-brainer, as it allowed me to stay home, play basketball, go to college, and actually work and save some money as well. So it's something that you might want to keep in mind when you're doing your research. It's much less expensive than a four-year university, and it could save you thousands by paying the significantly lower tuition fee for the first 2 years of the four-year degree. Community colleges also offer smaller class sizes, which could be valuable in the first 2 years of the introductory classes, and you have more contact with the professors. They're generally less rigorous in their application process, and they have lower entry requirements than a four-year university. So students with a BTech or OCR or other similar qualifications may apply to community colleges. And many community colleges do not require any admission exam scores to be admitted. You can find more information on our website. We also have a link to a community college webinar that you can watch. Rowena, over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Vasha. So what are our funding tips? I'm going to be quick and brief with this one. Make sure you're starting early. Start early in the process. If you think you need funding, then make sure you're putting that front of your research process, and make sure you're kind of being really on top of all of those deadlines and things. My next point is bolded because I can't say this enough. Be flexible with choosing universities. There are loads of universities out there, 4,000 of them in fact, and if you're flexible and open-minded, you may well find a funding situation that is a really good fit for you. If, however, you are hell-bent on applying to, say, UCLA and you need funding, you're going to be at a tricky spot because they just don't offer funding to international students. So each university, you're going to need to spend time kind of getting under the skin and understanding what are their policies around this. We're happy to help with the process. And then finally, sometimes I have people saying to me, well, how, Rowena, can I be a standout applicant and potentially win funding towards my studying? Now, here's the thing. Columbia University, which is in the middle of Manhattan, I would tell you that there are literally hundreds of people in the UK who end up applying to somewhere like Columbia. Now, I'm not saying don't apply to Columbia at all, but just be aware that you are going to be one of many people from the UK in that application pool. And so you're going to need to stand out even more to perhaps be one of the few students from the UK that somewhere like Columbia might admit. So how can you make yourself stand out perhaps more? Or maybe it's about changing which university you're applying to. So a university like Washington University in St. Louis is a top US university, but it doesn't have as many people in the UK applying to it. So if you apply to somewhere like WashU, then you may well find that you're standing out just by nature if you're from the UK and they don't have super loads of people applying for the UK. So you can kind of stand out in that way. So it's about thinking about where are you going to be a competitive applicant. Back over to you, Basha, if you're around.
Thank you, Rowena. So how do you complete an application for a US university? There are various components to an application, which we'll talk about in a second. But what are the universities looking for when you apply? So the first thing they look for is your academic achievements, which are measured by your GCSEs and your A-levels or equivalent. and admission test scores if required. Now, keep in mind that not all universities require an admissions course, and some universities are test optional, which means you could choose to take an admission test or you don't have to. You could check that on each university's website. It will give you information if they are test optional or not. The next thing they look for is academic fit. So what are the reasons for you pursuing a degree at their university and their institution? And how does it help you towards your goals? So if you want to go to New York, why Columbia? Why not NYU? What makes Columbia so special, for example? Do they have a particular program that you might be interested in? Or is there a campus activity that they have and other universities don't have? Or do you fit perfectly in with the university's mission? Those are the things that are important. And as Rowena mentioned, that's something that will make you stand out. They want to know why you are pursuing a degree at their institution. What makes you special? Another thing they look for is your extracurriculars. So the US has a big focus on that. However, that doesn't mean that you have to do everything and anything under the sky. But you do want to highlight the things that you are involved in and just basically boast about what things you do outside of school. The next thing that's very important is the personal attributes. So the US admission process is a holistic process. They not only look at your grades, but they look at you as a person. So it's very important to put that across in your application. They look to diversify their campuses and classrooms as well. So what makes you different from other students that are applying to their institution? They want to know who you are. So they want to know your interest in the academic field of choice that you might have, what kind of character you have, do you have any leadership abilities? What makes you stand out? And I'll go through the application components because it does vary from the UK application. So unlike the UK, applying to each university, you apply to each university individually, rather than a centralized body like UCAS. And as we mentioned before, you could apply to as many universities as possible, or as much as time you have or money you can afford to put towards the application costs. But we do recommend that you apply to about 6 to 10 schools as that seems to be most manageable for most people. Now, there is something called the Common Application in the US, which around 900 universities use. And it's just a system to help streamline the demographic aspect of the applications. So it's not UCAS in that you will still have to tailor all of your applications to each university. And each university will have different questions that they ask you and different supplementary questions that you have to answer. There's also no standard process for applications, deadlines, or requirements. So this will vary university by university. So it's very important that when you narrow down to your 6 to 10 choices, you check all the deadlines, where or how you need to apply, and what requirements the university requires you to have. Each university, like I mentioned, will have their own deadlines and application requirements. So some might use the Common App and some might have their own application process on their website. And most applications will follow a similar format. So you'll be able to reuse or adapt some of the materials you prepare for. But just make sure that you know what questions you're answering and you make those changes in each application. Most application components will include application form with your basic demographics. Admission test scores, once again, this is if they are required for that specific universities. You would require to submit, your school will be required to submit transcripts of your A-levels and GCSEs results. There will be some essays that you have to complete. and this will vary university to university. And you will have to submit 2 to 3 letters of recommendations. So that might be from your teachers, your counselors, someone from your school that knows you well. And like we mentioned before, there is an application fee of between $100 to $150 per application. So also keep that in mind as well. So we've mentioned admission tests, but what roles do they play? There is no set national curriculum at secondary school in the US, and admission tests are a way to evaluate applications or applicants from diverse areas and the different schools across the US. But as we mentioned before, make sure that you check each university if they require the test, especially since COVID, many universities are making their admissions test optional, but you could find that information on their website. Now, if you do have to take an admission test, you should do that in the summer after year 12 or the autumn of year 13 before the half-term holiday. So that's about 10 to 12 months before enrollment, and is when you would want to sit an admission test. Now, universities typically require either the ACT or the SAT. Like I said, however, a lot of universities are going test optionals for this. Now, choosing between the SAT and ACT, so one isn't considered to be better than the other. It's just kind of what's the best fit for you. So the best way to decide is to take a timed full-length practice test of each type. So there are many free ones online that you could take. And the content and style of the SAT and ACT are very similar, but it's kind of looking at the factors, how you handle the time pressure and what type of questions you find most challenging that could help you determine which test is a better fit for you. So for example, I took both in America. However, I did prefer one over the other, as I found the questions in one of them to be a bit they just didn't fit my style of learning, so I prefer one over the other. So if you do have to take an admission test, make sure that you take a practice test beforehand, just to see which one you basically like doing better or like doing more, and which one you'd score better in. The other thing that universities will expect are your transcripts. So this is a list of your academic qualifications and marks covering year 10 through 13 in England and Wales, year 11 through 14 in Northern Ireland, and S3 through S6 in Scotland. Now, the transcript is generated by your school. However, you might need to provide your school or a counselor in your school with information about what to include in a transcript, as well as any additional school reports. If your school does not have the capability to print a transcript, you may have to create a template, and there is one on our website. And the transcript may include things like the years you attended that school, your GCSE score, your predicted A-levels. Keep in mind that there is no direct conversion between UK and US marks, so the report will be in the British system. Now, most universities understand the British system grading scale, so there isn't a need for you to convert any grades. And the transcript is typically submitted online by the school. Now, some universities will ask for a school report, and this is basically information that contains, it contains information about the school itself, just for context. And once again, there's templates for school reports available on our website as well. Now, you will likely be required to gather 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. So the letter should be a marketing tool for you as an applicant. So you might want to pick referees that have a particular area that they could speak about you that makes you stand out. And you might want to direct the referees to write about something specific that they might know that happened to you or that you've been through or that makes you interesting. It might be your ability to succeed at university. So it might be about your past academic performance, the observations about your performance in class or on any assignments that you had. It might be about your school awards, your writing and critical thinking skills, your subject knowledge, work experience, things like that. It might be about your ability to positively contribute to the university department or the campus life or the diversity of the university or your leadership abilities and character, your involvement in school or the community. So you should ask someone who knows you well, both in and out of the classroom. Hey, the university may provide you with some loose guidance for selecting referees. For example, one letter from a counselor, at least one letter from a teacher, etc. It will generally be your responsibility, however, to choose and liaise with your referees. So it's very important that you pick the right person and also that you ask them to be your referee, because it will take some time on their part to actually put a reference letter, a recommendation letter together as well. We suggest that you consider meeting with your referee to discuss the letter. So it's in your best interest to help your referee write the best letter they can about you. And you may wish to schedule a meeting to discuss your reasons for doing an undergraduate degree at that particular university and your interest in that university, what your future goals are, what your academic achievements are, and what you've done in your extracurricular activities that they might not be aware of. Make sure that the referee is aware of deadlines and any paperwork that they need to complete. Don't forget, it is your responsibility to inform the referees of the deadlines and paperwork required. And encourage your referees to avoid being restrained and too modest. So American referees tend to write in a very enthusiastic tone. They use very positive and descriptive language. They discuss the applicant both in and out of the classroom, and they talk about the applicant personally. So if there's a teacher that knows you personally, or a counselor, it's probably someone that you might want to consider. And keep in mind what will be written about your American counterparts when preparing your UK referees to write your letters. And encourage the referees to refrain from using restrained or modest language. So this is the time for them to boast about you, basically. Another part of the application process are the essays. So this is one of the most important part of the application process for undergraduate study in the US. Strong essays can set you apart from other applicants. It gives you an opportunity to showcase yourself to a university. So this isn't like your typical UCAS personal statement. Rather than submitting an explanation of your interests and achievements in a particular field of study, as you would in UCAS, you will be asked to respond to between 1 to 3 essay questions on the university application. Now, each university will set its own questions, as well as the desired length for the answer or your response. However, on the Common App system, there will be one essay question that goes to all the universities and supplemental questions, which are unique to each institution. So one of the 7 Common App prompts might be something like, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? Or describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So it would be unlikely that you will be able to compose one essay that will sufficiently answer questions posted by multiple universities. However, keep in mind that many students are able to reuse elements of the essays for different universities. Just make sure that each time you do answer the question correctly. So some writing tips that we recommend is that first you ensure that you address the question fully. Make sure you use clear and concise language. Try to avoid vague or empty statements or cliches. If you reuse an essay, be careful to submit the correct essay to the correct university or the program. And make sure you double check that all references within the text are to the correct university. You don't want to send an essay to University of Michigan if you sent, with University of Ohio's name somewhere in that essay. Make sure you proofread extensively and ask someone else to proofread your essay and offer their feedback as well. That might be very important. When someone else reads it, they might give you some pointers or maybe just they'll spot a mistake that you haven't seen. And the most important thing is to be yourself. So don't give the admissions officers the answers you think that they want to hear. Tell them the truth. They want to know what sets you apart, what makes you different. They want to know about your personality and for that personality to come through in the essays. And if you need some more tips, you could go on our website and there's links to example essays on university websites as well that you could have a look at. Over to you, Rowena.
Great stuff, Basha. Thanks so much. And for some of you who have been submitting questions in the Q&A box, I've been answering some of those along the way. So do check out the answer tab if you think your question suddenly disappeared out. And we will be taking more questions at the end. So if you do have a question about what you've been hearing this evening, feel free to pop it in the Q&A box. I just want to quickly cover a couple of other things about other ways to get and study in the United States. It doesn't just have to be about a full undergraduate degree. There are other options. So if we can have the next slide. Amazing. So highlighting there's lots of opportunities to study abroad from a UK program. So you could, for example, have a look at a UK university that offers a year abroad as part of your UK degree. It doesn't have to be American Studies that offers this, which is one degree that often has a year in the US built in. All sorts of UK universities are offering opportunities from everything from bioscience to accounting to development studies, opportunities to go and study abroad, including at US universities. And you can do that through your UK university. And the great news is you can use your UK student loan in the United States, and it's often a much cheaper way of going and studying in the US. So that's a really great idea. You can also look at summer institute programs. These are summer programs to go and study at a US university summer. While you're doing a UK undergraduate degree. We even offer one, so you can go and have a look on our website about that. And then you can also look out for internships or summer work, so things like whether it might be Camp America, go and be a camp counselor in the US. Lots of British students do this, including lots of people who play soccer, what we know as football. So skills like that can be really useful in those kind of camp settings. And so lots of UK students go and take up those opportunities for summer work. And then you can also look at doing what we would call postgrad study. That's master's or a PhD. You could look at doing in the US as well. So there's lots and lots of different options on the table. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's a few ways that we can help you in your journey, and we're going to outline those quickly now. If you've got questions, stick them in the Q&A box. If I can have the next slide, that would be great. So I just want to flag here something called the Sutton Trust US program. Our colleagues and I run the Sutton Trust US program with another charity called the Sutton Trust. But we deliver the Sutton Trust US program for anyone who's interested in studying in the United States. We're looking for people who are in year 12 in England and Wales, year 13 in Northern Ireland, or in S5 in Scotland. We're looking for very high achieving year 12 students who come from low income grounds in low-income families. And what we do is take them through a program that lasts through to the end of year 12 to explore studying in the United States. It does include a free trip to the US to visit US universities. And then for those that want to, in year 13, we will help them apply to US universities and win the kind of financial aid that they would need to study there. So huge amount of information available. If you Google Sutton Trust US program, you'll come up with a website. It's free for students who are accepted onto the program. We take 150 students every single year. And just a real encouragement to go and check that out. Flagging deadline is Sunday night. So if you are interested, as my mum would say, this is time to get your skates on. Go check it out. Make sure you're putting together an application and submitting it in time for the deadline. Back over to you, Basha. You're on mute.
That would help. Thank you, Rowena. Some other resources that we offer, you could always visit our website for advice, different guides and schedules of events that we run throughout the year. Under the Going to the USA tab, there's an undergraduate guide with details on choosing, funding, and applying. So some of the information that we've been through today, you can find the information about that. We also take questions by email through our advising inbox. And we do offer one-to-one video appointments with an advisor on Zoom if you need to meet with one of us. And you could always reach out to us if you have any questions as you go along the process of applying at any time from now till basically when you go to university. And we also love to hear from students that go to university and they let us know how they are doing. We have various events about studying in the US online and in person throughout the year. So keep a look on our website in the events tab where you could see all our updated events that we have. And every year in September, we have US College Day here in London, which is a big fair where you could meet with over 120 US universities and exhibitors from all over the US. It's completely free to attend. You just have to register for a time ticket. The registration this year opens in late summer of 2023. We would definitely recommend coming to the fair if you're thinking about studying in the US, as you get to meet and speak to admission counselors that will most likely read your essays and your applications. And it's a good time to kind of see the range and variety of universities that are available to students in the for students to apply to in the US. And that's the end of our presentation. Now we're going to go through our Q&A and answer some questions. If you can, please keep the questions general, just so it could help the whole group. But if you have any specific questions, you could also email us and we'll be happy to answer that. And don't forget that the recording will be sent around to you if you need to head off for the evening.
Great stuff. Basha, I have a question for you. Is it necessary to visit US universities before applying or accepting the admission?
No, it's not. A lot of universities have virtual campus tours that you could have a look. What we would suggest is going on their YouTube channel, as they actually have a lot of videos about their campus life, including a tour of their campus. They have little videos like life in a student at a certain university that you could see. So it's definitely not necessarily to go visit a US university. Rowena, I have a question for you. What is the best way to try and apply for sports scholarships?
I feel like this might even be better for you, Basha, but I would suggest the first thing you need to do is understand if you're playing at a level in your sport that would be at the right level to attract a sports scholarship. And we've got some information and resources. Perhaps Basha, you could pop a link to our sports scholarship page where there's some resources to help that, and particularly perhaps a link to that PDF. And you also want to understand if the university actually if your sport that you play is actually a sport that attracts sports scholarships. So for example, men's rugby is a great sport, but it doesn't attract any sports scholarships in the United States. So those are the first things you want to do. And then what I would do is follow the link that Basha is going to be posting in the chat so that you can kind of follow that through that process. And we'd be happy if you want to book in a one-to-one video call. We can take you through the whole process that follows. I also just would say, if you place a sport and you love your sport, but maybe you're not playing at an elite level, do not fear. Having a sport on your application looks really great. And there are so many opportunities to play that sport once you get to an American university. Sometimes there's an idea that you have to have a sports scholarship in order to play your sport at university, and nothing could be further from the truth. So just wanting to remind you that. While Basha is finding that link, I'm just going to whip through some other questions. I have been answering some of them already. We've had a question: do you need maths A-level as a requirement, or some kind of way of proving math skills? So depends entirely on the university. So that's the question, was do we need maths? Not necessarily. If you are looking to study a maths, perhaps major in maths, that might be something that you might want to be making sure that perhaps you've got an A-level or equivalent, you know, perhaps it's been one of your subjects in your IB, to have maths in there. But you don't have, there's no particular set of subjects that you have to have to apply to an American university. Some universities may ask for an SAT or ACT, and these exams do test your kind of quant skills, maths, reasoning, things like that. So that may be also one way to, if the universities that you're applying to actually are looking for those sets of skills, and they may be also looking for these exams, that can be one way of satisfying that requirement. What I would say is if a university says it's test optional, please believe them, it is test optional. Universities are saying over and over again, make sure people know, if we say we're test optional, we really do mean that. Basha, you might want to pop that link in the chat to everybody rather than just over to me. Amazing. Okay, so someone else has asked, when it says about international fee funding, e.g. 100% of the demonstrated financial need of any student we admit, what does that mean? So it's a really good question. What the university is saying there is, if they wanted to admit you to their university and you literally had zero amount of resources available to you, there is no money in your family, there is no income perhaps coming in, you literally need 100% of the cost of attendance to be met, then that is what the university would make. Are they going to offer 100% of the of the cost of attendance to every single student? No, because each family is different, so different families may be able to contribute different amounts. So hopefully that one is answered. We've got a couple of people who are asking about this idea of early applications and early decision. So these are admissions terms that you might see popping up on university websites. Early decision and early application refer to making an application earlier in the process than perhaps a regular deadline, which is normally somewhere around the 1st of January, perhaps January 15th. So early applications happen in the autumn, and they are a way, if you just apply early action, you are applying early, you get your decision early, great. If it's a yes, then you're in and you might not make any more applications. Early decision is a binding commitment, so you only apply early decision or restrictive early action to one university. And when you apply early decision in particular, what you are doing is making a commitment to attend that university if you're admitted, no matter what. So you it's not something to be taken on lightly. You want to be really sure that that is the university you want to attend, and you would only apply early decision to one university. If you've got more questions, super happy to answer those, particularly if anyone's thinking about that. Just drop us an email. Bash will pop in the chat box our email address, drop us an email, and we're more than happy to answer any questions, or you can set up a video call with us to talk about that more. Okay, Basha, do you have a question you want to answer?
Yes. You mentioned, so we mentioned that entrance exams are sometimes optional. Are you at a disadvantage if you don't take the exam?
Please
oh yeah, sorry. No, you're not. For the universities that are test optional, you are not at a disadvantage if you don't take the exam. If you're not good at taking exams and you go take the ACTs or SATs and you score low on that exam, and then you decide to put that in your application form to a university that is test optional, they'll probably look at it and be like, "Ooh, something doesn't add up." So you are definitely not at a disadvantage if you don't have or take an admissions exam. It's based on your whole application process, so your essays, your reference letters, your GCSEs and A-levels.
Amazing stuff. Okay. So I had a question I wanted to answer, which is, oh my goodness, I've lost it now. My apologies, everybody. Perfect. When do American universities usually begin after the summer? Well, many American universities will actually start their autumn term in early to mid-August, which is earlier than most UK universities start. So just being a bit aware that the American school year, college year, works a little bit differently. You may well find that you're starting university at the beginning of August, which is a bit different to how it is here. Basha, do you have a question you want to answer?
Yeah, I have one question here. Its question is, for the CSS profile, is it usually one profile for every university, or one profile to be used among all the universities you have applied to? So for the CSS profile, you fill out the information, and that one profile goes to all the universities that you applied to. So you don't have to repeat that profile, unlike the application process where you have to change the questions. The CSS profile is just one profile.
Amazing. We've got a question. Someone's asked, how much does a one-to-one video call with us cost? Answer is completely free. Basha and I make ourselves available. We're also happy to answer emails for free. You can't pay us for our advice. We're a completely free service. I have a question from a student who's asking, do US universities consider things like Welsh Bac or the EPQ to be qualifications? Both of those things are things that go on your transcript, and they're a great question. Yes, they do want to consider them, but they also want to make sure they're seeing, you know, if you're studying A-levels, for example, if you're in Wales, then they, or I guess also if you're doing an EPQ, they want to see that you're doing 3 or 4 A-levels, and then they're really happy to see things like the Welsh Bac or an EPQ on top of that. That's absolutely fine. I'm happy there's another question. What's the approximate financial threshold for a student's family income to get financial aid? This really depends on the formula of the universities. But what I would say is some universities will have things on their website, like if your family household income is under $65,000 a year, and we often need base financial aid, we're not anticipating that family household, assuming that you haven't got kind of crazy, I don't know, assets somewhere in there, when we wouldn't consider that household to contribute anything. So even what I would consider here in the UK to be middle income families can and do qualify for financial aid. Might it be a whole 100%? Perhaps not, but it is a kind of sliding scale depending on the family and the family's financial circumstances. So just don't be surprised. And then things like merit-based scholarships are not based on family income at all. So merit-based scholarships are not considered at all in that. The family's resources are not considered at all in that. So hopefully that helps as well. Basha, do you have a question you want to answer?
Rowena, I have a question for you.
Oh, okay, cool.
What do you need to be considered high achieving? Is there a certain threshold?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that this is in reference to the Sutton Trust US program. And so I'm going to drop a link in the chat to where you can see all the information about that and what we consider to be high achieving. Basically, it is, there we go, a link in the chat there. And so hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to go and have a look at that link.
I actually have one more question
Sure.
that I can answer. How can we find out about an acceptable SAT score? So every university on their website, they'll have a student profile that will give you, that will show what the average student SAT or ACT scores were like, what their grades were like. And also on the Big Future website, when you narrow down universities on their website, it actually gives you the lowest score that has been accepted and the highest at that particular university. So those are the two resources that you would use to look up the SAT score that's acceptable to a specific university, because once again, it will vary institution by institution.
Perfect stuff. I know we've got several very specific questions about sports scholarships. So my suggestion there would be feel free to drop us an email. Bash has put the email in our in the chat, and we'd be more than happy to pick up with the very kind of some of those more specific questions. Other questions that I just want to make sure we have answered. So somebody's asking about Sutton Trust US program, what US universities are included in the visit to the US. It at the moment is a big secret. We've tended to go in the past to universities in the New England region, and that's kind of a range of different universities that we would go and visit there. So hopefully that helps answer that question. Someone's asking, can you use a health insurance from the UK or does it need to be from a provider in the US? It's a great question to be asking US universities themselves. My sense is probably that you would need a provider in the US in order to meet the system in the US and to make sure that you're covered as a student on campus and that you've got the appropriate level of medical care in place and support. So my suspicion is that you would need a US healthcare provider, but it's a question that a university would answer for you and be able to confirm either way. So hopefully that helps. That one. Basha, do you have a question you want to answer?
Just trying to look. Are there any universities or schools in the US that specialize in film acting? Yes, there's loads. What we suggest is going on the Big Future search and just typing in film or acting, and it will give you the results for every university across the US that specializes in film and acting.
Perfect. Amazing stuff. I have someone who's asking, but I assume it depends on the university you attend, but are payments for tuition fees and other fees to be paid up front, or do they have a process where you can pay gradually over a period of time? So it entirely depends on the university. It's something you can ask about if you're admitted to the university. Most universities are either happy to have payments made in one go at the beginning of the year, or perhaps over the course of quarters or semesters. So it's normally kind of this quarter's bill or something like that. But it just entirely depends on the university and how they structured that piece. But what a US university and what the American government wants to know is that you have the funds in place to go and study in the US, whether that's through the form of a scholarship or need-based financial aid, or whether that's through personal funding, family funding. To get a US student visa, you need to satisfy the US government that you have the funding in place. So that's something to just consider, and a US university can kind of help you through that process and articulate that. But it is before you can actually go, you need a visa, and that visa is dependent on making sure that you have the funding. So hopefully that helps answer that question. I think my suggestion, Basha, is that we roll things up here. I know that there are a couple of very specific questions in the chat box, and please do use the email address. You can copy and paste your question out of the Q&A box if you do that right now, and pop it in an email, and then we can make sure that we come back to you with full pieces. But we just want to say a huge appreciation for your attendance at this webinar. Hopefully it's been useful, and please do feel free to ask anything else that you'd like to ask along the way as well. So with that, I'm going to wish everyone a good night, and please do just reach out if you want to ask anything else about studying in the United States. We are here to help. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.